Royal Roads, we also always acknowledge the lands that we're on. So Royal Roads University is located on the traditional lands of the Kosepsum and the Lekwungen ancestors and families who've been here for thousands of years. And I know many of us are still working from home right now, so I'm also on the traditional unceded lands of the Cowichan peoples. So really just want to take this moment for us all to think about and acknowledge where we are right now, and just really grateful to be able to do the work that we do here. So today we are going to be talking about how to advance your environmental career through two particular programs. So first, the GC, or the graduate certificate rather, in Science and Policy of Climate Change, and also the MA and MSc in Environmental Practice. So my name is Christy Jones and I'm an education advisor at the university, but I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Leslie King, who's the program head for both of these programs. And we're also going to be joined by Elizabeth Bruch, who is a current student of both the certificate and the master's degree. So we'll be getting into stuff as we go along in the presentation, but really thrilled to be having the co-hosts that I have today. And there's also a few folks that are helping out behind the scenes that you can't quite see. So we have Andrea, who's here, and she will be helping out with any tech challenges that you may have. So if you run into any issues, you can just message her and she can help you out. And we also have Christine, who's joining in the chat box today from our enrollment team to help answer any questions or things like that as well. And I believe we also might have Heather and Kish from the School of Environment and Sustainability. So we have quite an awesome crew here today helping out behind the scenes too. All right.
So far we have Calgary, Lethbridge.
Perfect. I see Newmarket, Ontario.
Newmarket, right. Yeah, good. Welcome.
Wonderful. Awesome to see you all here today. And to go through our agenda a little bit, so we'll be going through a brief overview of the Royal Roads University experience, the program-specific information, then we'll start our conversation with Elizabeth, and then finish off with the application process. But of course, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box as we go along, and we'll try to get to those as soon as we can. So a little bit about us. So these programs we're talking about today are online. So you'll notice on the bottom right-hand corner there, we do have a shout out, an ode, if you will, to the fact that we have been doing online learning for over 25 years at Royal Roads. But we also like to give a snapshot of the place that we have our campus. If you do decide to visit or come to campus for convocation or anything when it's safe to do so, this will be your place to come and visit and explore too. So on the top left-hand corner, we have Hatley Castle. On the top right-hand corner, we have the Japanese gardens. So Hatley Castle itself was built in the early 1900s, and there was many curated gardens that were manicured gardens that were built right adjacent to the castle. So the Japanese gardens is just one of them, but there's also the Italian gardens, there's the rose gardens, and lots of other places for you to explore right around the castle. You'll notice around the castle too, there's lots of trees. So what you can't see more vividly in photos is we're on over 500 acres of old growth forest. So there's lots of trails for you to explore should you choose to visit campus. And then the bottom left-hand corner is the Esquimalt Lagoon. So we're also right on the water. If you are a nature fan, this is a bird sanctuary. So there's lots of amazing wildlife for you to check out and go for a nice walk along the water there. But to dig in more a little bit what online learning looks like at Royal Roads. So we've been doing online learning since the start of our institution, and it's something that we pioneered and are very comfortable with. It's obviously something that our programs have been online since well before everybody had to make a quick transition during COVID-19. So what it could look like is a flexible schedule with 15 to 20 hours a week worth of coursework. The platform we use is Moodle 3.0 or 3.2. So you might have used Moodle at a different institution perhaps, but it could look quite different depending on where you went because each institution customizes it to our own needs. And if you haven't used Moodle before, I always like to say that if you can use a social media platform like Facebook or Twitter or any of those, you will have no problem with this because it's quite intuitive to be able to navigate all your coursework through there. And we also have a computer help desk if you do run into any challenges. So they are there to help you navigate any issues that you may be having, or if you want to learn how to use a feature even better, anything like that, they are there for you. And then we also have a quite extensive library for you to explore online. So things like article databases, so you can find out some more about thesis and major projects, statistics and data. So this will all be resources that are available to you to help you throughout all of your projects. And we're also in Ashoka U Changemaker campus. So this is a designation that has been given to a select number of institutions, and we're very proud of it. It means that the type of education that we provide is very interdisciplinary, it's very entrepreneurial, it's very solutions oriented. So that can be the type of philosophy, I guess, you can expect infused throughout all of our programs at Royal Roads. But with that in mind, I am going to pass it over to Leslie now to chat a little bit more about the partnership we have with EcoCanada and how that works with all of our programs.
Thank you very much, Christy, and welcome everyone. Delightful to see you here from wherever you are. Looks like we have a good spread. Our programs in environmental practice are all created and run in partnership with EcoCanada. EcoCanada is the environmental sector organization for Canada. And EcoCanada does, Christy, do you want to give me the next slide? EcoCanada keeps in touch with the environmental sector in Canada, particularly with employers. They map trends in the environmental sector. And as most of you probably know, those trends are upward in all cases, since environment is more and more critical to our lives. And they also certify professionals in the environmental professional in training and the environmental professional designation. And students in the programs are eligible for those designations. Next slide. They also track the growth of the sector and the growth of jobs in the sector. And of course, you can see here, those job creations in environment are trending straight upward, and particularly in the climate field, which I'll talk more about in a while. EcoCanada also has a wonderful job board where they put up jobs that employers are advertising. And so it's a membership organization, and I urge all the students in our programs to belong, and I urge all of you who are interested in the environmental sector to belong. Thanks, Christy. So I'll talk first about the Master of Arts and the Master of Science in environmental practice. Christy, thank you. These are fully online programs, and they provide very flexible graduate education for environmental professionals seeking upgrading or advanced credentials. They're very, very flexible programs because they're designed to accommodate the schedules of working professionals. Next slide. So they're fully online, 30 credits, part-time. You can take as many or as few courses a semester as you like. You can take one course a semester. You do have to continue to register for one course, or you can take up to 3 courses a semester. And sometimes with permission, if you're not working, you can take more than 3. 4 would be the limit, I think. So normally you can complete the program in 2 to 5 years. Most of our students complete in 2 to 3 years. And that, of course, depends on how many courses you take a semester, but that's entirely up to you. So the program's very flexible in that regard. It's also flexible in terms of how you focus your program. So if you have a particular interest or a particular need or are working in a particular area, you can focus your program around that area. and particularly at the end where you take where you do a research paper or a practicum, and you can focus those on your particular interests. These programs align with the EcoCanada occupational standards for the environmental professional certification, and they provide you with the educational requirement for that certification. And as sort of a side benefit, because these programs are fully online and the professors use all kinds of different online tools to engage the students in the courses. So the program promotes online skills and competencies, which are increasingly in demand in the workplace. Christy? Thank you. So at the end of the program, by the way, this is the wisteria in the Italian garden, and you might recognize it because it's also my background. This is a beautiful garden, but I recognize that your programs, should you come into the MEP programs, are fully online. But this will still be your university and your campus, and we'd be delighted if you visit anytime, but particularly at graduation. So at the end of the program, you would choose either a research paper or a practicum to complete the program. There's also an opportunity to take up to 3 courses at the University of Denver. And this is another unique aspect of the MEP programs. The University of Denver, of course, gives you an opportunity to learn more about environmental issues in the US and globally. Finally, the MEP programs can include the new graduate certificate in science and policy of climate change. That program is 9 credits, and you can include that program as part of the MEP program and count the 3 courses or the 9 credits towards your graduation with a master's degree. At the end of taking both of those, you would end up with both credentials, which I think is a wonderful attribute of the program. You would get both a master's degree and the certificate in science and policy of climate change. And the student who we have on the webinar with us today is doing just that. So you might want to ask her questions about that. Next slide, please. So as I said, the programs are very flexible. There's only 2 real requirements, and you take those 2 requirements at the beginning of your program, an introductory course in sustainability, and then a research methods course. And then you would select your elective courses from your stream, whether it's a Master of Arts or a Master of Science. And if you're taking courses from the University of Denver, you would submit a letter of permission with exact start and end dates. You register at the University of Denver, and when the course is completed, you request an official transcript, and your credits will be transferred to the MEP programs. Next slide, please. So the next intake is conveniently in September, but we also have an intake every year in January. Those deadlines are a little flexible, and I always apply to have them extended. So if people are slow off the mark getting their applications in, which I don't recommend, then we usually extend them by a couple of weeks. But I do recommend that it's rolling admission. I recommend that you get your applications in as early as possible so you can plan your lives. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm thrilled to present the brand new graduate certificate in science and policy of climate change. I've been trying to implement a program such as this for many, many, many years at different universities. And I'm delighted to say that Royal Roads has now adopted this, and it's available for you. It's a wonderful program. I should let Elizabeth speak about it, but The certificate has 9 credits or 3 courses. It's also offered in partnership with EcoCanada. It's entirely online. It can be a standalone certificate or, as I said, part of the MEP program. The first 2 courses are also available as electives in other programs at the university. The Master of Environment and Management, the Master of Interdisciplinary Studies. You can also take it as the first course in the MA in Climate Adaptation Leadership. The great thing about all these EP programs and the certificate is you pay for them 1 course at a time. So there isn't a huge whack of tuition due right at the outset, but rather you pay for 1 course at a time. So if you take 1 course a semester, that's all you pay for that semester. Next slide, please. So who's it for? Environmental professionals, basically anyone who wants access to this burgeoning climate field. And you know, I always say that the best way to get into any field or to change your life is to take some education in that field. So it's also for professionals in other fields who want to transition to climate careers, and people who are already working as climate professionals who want to expand their knowledge base. You are also eligible for the professional certification. And we have a lot of mid-career professionals who are considering a career change, and graduates from abroad who are looking for climate education opportunities. Next slide, please. So the certificate program can be completed in less than 1 year. You start off with the mandatory course in academic integrity for the first 2 weeks of the program. Then the first course is the science and impacts of climate change. And the second course is climate policy and governance. And that second course is just wrapping up right now. The first course wrapped up a couple of months ago. And the final course, the capstone course, which I am teaching, begins on Monday. And that's the Climate Solutions course. This is an experiential course. Students identify and work in an organization, a community, or a First Nation to implement climate solutions. And so they help that organization and at the same time learn about ways in which that organization can influence and provide solutions to climate issues. Next slide, please. So this program starts every year in January. And as I say, we're just completing the first round, or we will complete it by November. And the next application date is October. Yes, October 2021, that's correct. And then the January 2023 is October 9th, 2022. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you, Leslie. And with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen. And Leslie, if you want to kick off the conversation with Elizabeth, that would be great.
Sure. I am delighted to welcome Elizabeth Bruch here today, because when Elizabeth was trying to figure out whether she should take the MEP program, we had lunch together and we had a wonderful conversation. And so I am now delighted to welcome Elizabeth here. And she has since enrolled in the MEP program and the certificate in Science and Policy of Climate. So Elizabeth, maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about how you came here. What made you decide to take the program, what your journey was up until this point, and basically the decision that you made. and whether you're happy with that decision.
Yes, I'll just say that right away. Yes. Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, so Leslie was definitely instrumental in my decision. I'm one of the mid-career professionals who made a mid-career switch. This is actually sort of my second pivot. I started my professional life as a lawyer and then became a university professor. And I did a lot of work in law and policy, governance kinds of questions, a lot of international law. And then I was really interested, though, of course, in climate on the environment. And so my research and work was taking me in that direction, but I realized that there was so much I wanted to learn. I definitely think it's one of the defining issues of our time. So I started thinking about going back to school. I did have a pivotal conversation with Leslie, and she'll correct me if she remembers it differently, but my memory is that when I talked to Leslie, she said, it's either brilliant or crazy to do this. And she said, but I think it might be brilliant, at least, or both. So maybe the verdict is still out on that, but I have to say, I think that's true. But what I really wanted to do, I started in the MEP program. Leslie laid out her vision for this climate change program, but I started in 2019 and it wasn't yet in place. And so I was so delighted to still be in the program and able to add it in because that was such a big motivator for me. So that's sort of how I got here. And I really just wanted to be part of the work in a real way. I wanted to know more, be better grounded, and be able in a position to do work on what I think are these really important issues.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's great. Did you have any fears or concerns about entering the program? And have those fears been alleviated or reinforced?
I had gone back to school as an adult, so I was a little bit more ready for that. I think what that would be like. But I know one of the things I've seen over the program is people who have come back to school for the first time after having been working. I mean, there's a whole range of experiences that come in as students to the classes, but people do talk about that, like being worried about writing an academic paper or what it means to do citations or some of the jargon of academia that people have been away from. And one of the things that I think is really nice is people say that up front in the classes. Like there's always kind of a discussion forum that supports people saying, I'm worried about this, or and it's a really supportive community, I think, in every class I've had, where people say, oh, me too, or oh, look at this, and the instructors chime in on that. But I think it's a pretty welcoming community. And so I've really appreciated seeing that piece of it in terms of kind of going back to school. I think if you've been away for a while. I would also say I've had people in my classes who come straight through school and are intimidated the other way. They say, like, I've just been in school and here are all these they're professionals that are doing it. I don't have that sort of experience. And really, I think the atmosphere in all the classes I've had has been support, like really people interested in learning from each other and supporting each other. So that's, I think, a really nice part of it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. One of the concerns that many people have is a fully online program. And I'm wondering how that was for you, whether you've ever taken online education before, whether it satisfied your expectations or not, etc. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, I like it. For the same things that you were identifying, Leslie, the flexibility has been great. I had not taken online learning really, but then when I was teaching, I taught. So I had experienced it from that side. And one of the things that I've realized is how well Royal Roads does with online learning. Yeah. Like it really surprised me, like how best practices are really incorporated. So I really like the flexibility of it. I know that some people really want that face-to-face, but I've really liked the flexibility. I work full-time. I have kids. I couldn't do the program, I think, otherwise, because I can just manage it in that framework. So I've really liked it. And I do think that Royal Roads does it really well, that it builds in the platform I found pretty usable. You come to really expect what you're going to get in a class, and in a good way, right? That it's very transparent. You know, like what the map is. You can do your planning if you're a person who wants to kind of plan your deadlines and your schedule and expectations. And so I've appreciated all of that and really the flexibility of it. And in most
That's
classes,
great.
really had an opportunity to connect with other students, which I think is the thing that I was worried about missing out on in online
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah, it never fails to amaze me, Elizabeth, how much the students in the program get to know each other, get to know all their professors. It's amazing, and how deeply engaged they can be in the courses, which I think people don't expect from online learning, but we really do have it. And you know, I don't want to ask a leading question here, but what were the highlights of the program so far for you?
Well, I would say, you know, I came to it like with interest already.
Yeah.
And what it surprised me was like how much I still had to learn, right? That it like, you know, it's nice to have things that really kind of open up your thinking about an idea. So I thought that in the masters of the MEP, that intro to sustainability course was like, is such a great start because it's really lays out this, I think, a different way to engage with the really thorny questions of environmental practice, but in a way that's sort of informs you, but is like hopeful too, right? You don't like, it's easy sometimes, especially if you're interested in climate change like I am, to kind of tip into some despair. And I really feel like there's been such a good, that like, I just don't end up in despair. Like I'm really feel like you're connecting with like-minded people, but I learned so much for that. So that class was definitely a highlight for me, but also the climate. I really like this climate program. It was my interest, and what surprised me, actually, just to go back, one of the things I had worried about is I'm not a scientist. And so we did talk about like, what does it mean to be not a scientist coming into a program like this? And the first class in the graduate certificate is kind of focused on science and impact. And I really, it was great because I would say that I am so not a scientist, believe in science. So I didn't need to be persuaded of the science, but I couldn't believe how much I learned about the science and how much that really helped me to understand it. So that was a big surprise to me, how interested I was in, you know, like the Holocene and the Paleolithic record, you know, and all of that. So it was really, that was a really great class. That was a nice surprise, I would say.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I have a strong belief that all environmental students need both science and the policy, humanities, even aspects of environment. Also, I think in these programs, we're too busy to despair. And that's good,
Right.
because I think despair is the most negative of emotions when you're dealing with environment. What advice would you give to the people on the call who might be interested in taking the MEP or the certificate?
Well, I think it's not bad to ask yourself some version of the "is this a brilliant idea or crazy idea" question, and think about it, because it is a commitment, and think about how it fits kind of with your life goals, but also your logistics. And so I really thought about that, and you know, it's I don't want to be too rosy. Like, it can be a challenge sometimes, right? Because the courses march on and life marches on. We had a pandemic, you know, all that stuff kind of happens too. So I think it's good to kind of think realistically about what that is, what those challenges are, and how your life can kind of support it. But I really feel like it's the what's always balanced that against, for me, because of course, like I work, I have a family, and to add this on, but I always think that it touches back to like kind of what my values and my interests are. And what keeps me going is like how engaged I am, that I'm so interested in what we're talking about or the conversations we're having or learning about or connecting it to what is happening in my community or in the news, that really sustains me. But I do think those kinds of practical questions and kind of the trade-offs are really important to kind of think about coming into a program like this.
That's great, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Christy, if you have any questions, or if we can open it up to our audience for questions for Elizabeth, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah,
Do we have any in the chat?
There is a few. I'll put them out to both of you because Leslie, they might be questions that you can jump in on too. So a few questions about taking the grad certificate and the MEP program. So is the intention for students to first complete the certificate before applying and starting the MEP program, or do you recommend that folks apply at the same time if that's what they want to do?
You know, I think, well, if that's what they want to do, that's definitely what they should do. But I think it's different for everyone. Some people might want to get their toe in the water first and take the certificate first and see how that sits with them, and then go for the master's degree. Some people, it's really a lot better to take it a step at a time. For other people, I think the attraction of getting both the master's degree and the certificate sort of at the same time is very appealing. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I think that I had the toe in the water isn't a bad strategy to go to kind of see how it goes. But again, I think that there's a lot of I think it might also be that you kind of feel unsatisfied because the two classes go really quick and the practicum we'll see, but the time goes pretty fast. And so that there's something I think I've appreciated about having the fuller program that goes with it too, kind of beyond climate, not just climate, but yeah. So I think those are great points, Leslie.
Good, thank you. There's another one here. Regarding the courses comprising the certificate. No, you don't have to pay for it twice. That's the beauty of it. You know, the 9 credits count towards the 30 credits of the master's program. So you only pay for them once. Okay, then the next one, a work placement. Is Royal Roads going to help the student to find the appropriate work placement? Basically, I like students to find their own work placement. There's much more variety, many more different kinds of organizations than we could ever come up with at Royal Roads. And I think it's an important part of the process for students to identify the organization, negotiate what they could do for the organization. And there's always your own employer. I don't like you to just do what you've already been doing as part of your job, but if you can negotiate with your employer to do a project or do something different, you know, almost everyone is looking for ways to address climate change these days. And that's your job, is to help them find those ways. And in the process, learn about the challenges of that organization in facing climate change. Elizabeth, I know you've already organized yours.
Yeah. I heard in one of my courses that all policy is climate policy, which I'm starting to believe is true. So I do think that's true. And just to give a sampling from people that have been talking about it, it's really, I agree that there's a lot of diversity that people are bringing and following their interests, sort of looking around them and imagining, like, what are you interested in? And where might you be able to do that work? And people are kind of thinking about it in that way, which I think is really good, because there's not one solution or the best place to go, or it doesn't have to be, you really looking kind of in your own neighborhood or setting or whatever, I think is part of the philosophy in many ways of climate action. And so people are doing that. So that's my experience. I've negotiated with my current workplace to try to come up with a way to add something new to think about climate.
Perfect. Thanks, Elizabeth. Another question here, qualitative or quantitative? Yes, is my answer. In other words, both. So you might be monitoring and documenting greenhouse gas emissions, very quantitative, or you might be trying to educate the public about climate change, very qualitative. So either or both, I would say. And I don't mean to treat this lightly. There's just such a broad range of climate solutions that you can do whatever you want to do. To obtain an MSc, is the research paper quantitative or qualitative? Yes. And are you connected with an advisor? Yes. Your advisor is, you have two advisors. One is, if you're doing it with an organization, you identify a supervisor in that organization, and also the professor who's teaching the course is your academic advisor. Oh, the courses, when are they scheduled? The courses begin and end on a specified date, but they take place online. So most people who work are doing them in the evenings, doing their work in the evenings, etc. And there are occasionally synchronous sessions. I do mine on Zoom, others do them on Collaborate, but those are always recorded. So if people can't attend because of the time difference or whatever, they can always watch them later. Elizabeth, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that, yes, that's my experience is how most people do it. I'd say when there's group work, that's the only time that there's a bit of a juggle on time zones and schedules and things like that. But the technology that's provided, through the course site, through things like Collaborate, and also just in our worlds, people figure out what works for the team and so forth. But I think you're right. There is, most of it's asynchronous.
Yeah. Janice, I hope that answers your question. Now, Tyler had another question. Oh, flexible admission. Yes, there are two routes into the MEP and the certificate. One is standard admission, where there are requirements for admission. You need an undergraduate degree, a 4-year degree, and 2 years of experience in a relevant field. If you don't, and all of that with a B average. If you don't have that, the admissions advisors will start you on the process for flexible admissions, in which your experience, your volunteer experience, etc., make up for any deficiencies that you might have in the admissions requirements. Flexible admissions requires that you take the academic writing and critical thinking course and pass it with a B before you're admitted to the program. And that sounds punitive, but it isn't. People love that course, and it really sets them up for success in the program. I think we have some admissions advisors on the call. Yeah, Christine is there, and they will certainly tell you more about that.
I see another question on here regarding the main difference between the MA and the MSc programs. And yeah.
Okay.
And as well, Elizabeth, if you want to jump in with why you chose the MA stream a little bit more too, I think that would be a great addition as well.
I am not a scientist. I don't have a science background. And I think that I was wanting to build on what I had already. And so that kind of made, so those two things, right? Wanting to build on what I had already and take it in a different direction. But I have really liked having the mix of students in the different classes. Like I can't tell you how many times I've like Googled like, what are the neonatids, whatever the pesticides for bees that are so bad. I have to like Google terms like to try to understand what somebody was saying, you know, but in a really, like, it's really great because one of the things that I have taken away from the program is how important it is that scientists and non-scientists talk to each other, that scientists be able to communicate with people who aren't in science, and that people who aren't scientists be able to understand sort of things. And so I actually have really found, even though I'm in the MA side of the program, and sometimes the science classes look interesting to me, but I really like having scientists in the class or people from a variety of backgrounds, because I really think it really enriches the discussion for all of us, that we're talking to each other.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The main difference is to go into the MSc, you really need a science background. And that can be basic science, biology, chemistry, physics, etc., or it can be applied science like forestry, wildlife management, etc. But because our programs are not set up to introduce students to science or even to build on science so that people legitimately get a master's of science, if you don't have a science background, you should not go into the Master of Science. However, something that always bothers me is that some people seem to think that the Master of Arts is somehow less than science. Many, many, many of the jobs that employers want to hire people for really depend on those arts skills, writing skills, analytical skills, management, leadership skills, etc. And so I always try to encourage people as much as I can to go into the art stream. However, it's legit to do a Master of Science, and many employers, many of whom pay for the program, want that science designation. I hope that helps.
Another question on here from Carly. For the certificate, what hours per week can we expect for the courses?
Oops, I always forget the rule of thumb. Can anyone help me? There is a rule of thumb. For every credit hour, 15 hours. I can't remember the rule of thumb.
Yeah, I forget the rule of thumb too, but it's typically like around like 15 or 20 hours sometimes a week. I think you can possibly expect. But Elizabeth, as someone who's taken the first two courses of that, do you have like an idea of how much time you spend on the coursework?
I should know the answer to that best of all. I think it really, truthfully, it depends on the week. I find that I like the plan for the term because there's an arc to it, right? There's like, you look at when the assignments are due, you look at sort of what the expectations are. And so I think that's probably right as an average, but I think it really depends on sort of where you're at in the course, and the reading and, the assignments and stuff like that. I think that's probably kind of a realistic estimate, but I think it's not like it's spread like that, like, oh, every week I will spend 50, in my life, that is not how it works. It's like, where do I do this in my priorities and stuff? So I fit it in around the edges of full-time work and family, and appreciate kind of the planning that has to go into that.
Thank you very much. That was a much more realistic answer. Okay.
I received a private message with a question, actually. Can you please share examples of deliverables such as group projects, papers, and exams that you've done before?
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to me how that has varied over the different courses that we have. I think that there is a priority on having you interact with other students in the courses, but people do that in different ways. So there's always been a discussion forum of some sort in the courses that I've done that you participate on kind of a regular basis over the course. Although people organize that differently. And then sometimes there've been more formal kind of group projects that go with that. Sometimes there's more individual work. It kind of depends on the course. Some of it is what you might expect from a graduate course, right? Literature reviews, papers, things like that. But one of the things that I've really liked is that I've learned new things because of the assignments. So I have had to do, I've done presentations, we've done short video films on an issue, like lightning talks. We had to build an image, a map, like a social map of kind of a network in a class. I've had to do, so I've had to like up my PowerPoint skills and my video recording skills and things like that too. So there has been a mix of what's there. So sort of the usual that you might be kind of thinking about for graduate education, but also sort of other opportunities as ways to kind of show your learning through the course.
Elizabeth, I'm curious, have you ever taken an exam in any of your courses?
No. There was the quiz on the academic integrity, I think, but that was it.
I have never given an exam in any of these courses. So, but the students do good work. And there was a question, are they published? The research papers published? Sometimes they are. There's no requirement to publish them. And they're not published in the library because they are not theses. But many of my students write papers, research papers that they subsequently publish or even publish while they're still in the course. And many of them submit those papers to the organization that would be interested in them. And so they have a very applied focus. I hesitate to say this, but I am contemplating putting a thesis option into the MEP because the research paper is 6 credits. A thesis is typically 12 credits and requires a committee and is published by the library at the very least. Many of our MEP students, not a lot of them and not most of them even, do go on for PhDs. And then it's great for them to have the research paper as an example of their research skills. But some antediluvian universities still require a thesis. And so I hate for my students to be disadvantaged by not having a thesis option. So that's what I'm contemplating right now.
I don't see any other questions in the chat box at this time. I actually have one question for Elizabeth. I think we have a few more, a minute before we move on to the next section here, but I'm always curious to know, like, what is next for you, or what do you hope to do within your career or your next career once you complete the program, and what are your dreams once you come out of these programs?
Good question.
Thanks. Well, I said earlier, my view has become that all policy is climate policy. So I've been thinking about it in that way. And I think when I started the program, I kind of thought like, what environmental job will I get when I get out, or will I switch to when I get out? And I think my thinking has shifted a little bit to think about like, how might I, with what I have here, kind of find a way to do the work? Because I really feel like there's just so much room to move this conversation forward and to do it. So I guess it remains to be seen, but it's really made me think differently about it. I also think, I think that jobs are going to change as we start to pay attention in the way we need to on climate change issues, just like we saw with the pandemic. I think that there's still, we have a bit of a wake up call, sorry to be grim again, but like there's a wake up call coming for us. And I think that it's hard to imagine how that will be. But one of the things I've liked is it has really made me look around me and think, how can I like make this about the environment, or make this about climate change, or bring this to conversation to places where it's not happening? Because I don't think it can be siloed work. I do think, I agree with Leslie. I think that I'm in the public service, I'm watching the jobs that are there, and you do see climate stuff starting to materialize and rise up in other kinds of ways. So I think that's sort of where I'm thinking, is that, that I'm gonna take a more organic kind of view as I come out of the program on where that path might take me. I don't know if that answers. It's not very
Thank
sad,
you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's been delightful having you. Your answers were wonderful, and I think much more enlightening for people contemplating the program than anything I could have said. So thank you so much. It was
well,
wonderful.
thanks for inviting me, and I'm happy, to answer more if people do have questions. Christy, feel free to connect people with me if I can be helpful. But thanks for letting me participate. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And with that, I'm just going to share my screen again, and we'll go through a few quick more slides about the application process itself, just for those who are curious. But yeah, what a great conversation so far. I'm sorry I have to follow it up with these slides, but we'll go through, and hopefully we'll answer any final questions that you may have about the process itself. So Leslie did speak to the standard admissions and flexible admissions process beforehand, but just to quickly touch on that again, standard admissions looks like a 4-year undergraduate degree in a related field with a minimum GPA of a B, at least 2 years of relevant work or volunteer experience. And then here's that note there that applicants who meet the degree requirements but not the GPA requirements will normally be required to take that academic writing and critical thinking course. But like Leslie said, it's really not too hard of a course to navigate through, and we hear lots of great feedback that this is something that really sets you up well to continue on through the rest of the program. So flexible admissions could look like normally 6 years of relevant work experience or an equivalent combination of education experience. Again, that note on the academic writing and critical thinking course, that will be required through this route. And then if English is not your primary language, you can find our English language requirements on our website as well. So this is assessed on a case-by-case basis. So you're always welcome to have a conversation with Christine or someone from our enrollment team about this if you are a little bit concerned on how that will look for you. So how to apply? There is an online application fee of $126.28 to start off the process. And then with that, there is some supporting documents you will submit as well. So there is your official transcripts, and those do need to arrive to us sealed when they come. And a note with COVID-19 right now and everything to do with that, some institutions have been doing official emailed transcripts instead of the physical mail ones, and that is okay too. We have the processes set up to accept those as well. Next on here is a detailed resume. So this can actually be quite a bit longer than your typical job application resume, for example, and it can be as lengthy as you need to really communicate everything that we should know about your eligibility for the program. So obviously education and professional experience, but also things like volunteer, any projects you've been a part of, conferences you've attended, life experiences in general. This is a place where you can put that all down. And to go with that resume is the personal statement. So this is a great complementary document to that resume, which really is a place where you can map out and put down onto paper why you want to take this program, whichever program you decide. And again, really detailing your own life experiences and things like that, your past I guess, things that you've done, experiences that you would have added on your resume, you can expand on that here. And this is an especially important piece if you would be applying through that flexible admissions route. But Leslie, is there anything else you'd want to mention on this point, on the personal statement?
What I'm always looking for is, what is your motive to enter into the environmental field? And those can be many and various. And I'm very flexible about what I'm looking for. But I find that if you have the motivation, you will succeed. And so that's why I'm looking for volunteer experience, almost anything that demonstrates that motivation and passion for environmental issues.
Perfect, thank you. And the last one on this list here is 2 letters of reference. So it is ideal if that can come from one professional and one educational reference, and directly from their professional email address example. So we can just verify who they are and make sure that it's not a cousin or your mom who's referring you. It's always best if it's someone who can speak to your experience within those realms. There is a little wiggle room, say if you've been out of school for a number of years or things like that, to use like multiple professional references and stuff like that. But again, you can just have a conversation with us if you aren't sure about that piece for things. Alrighty, and of course we've been mentioning our enrollment team throughout this whole process. They are there to help you along the way. So Christine is one amazing example of the team, but you can also reach us at our general email address here. If you're applying as a Canadian student, it would be learn.more@royalroads.ca, or for international applications, it'd be learn.more.international@royalroads.ca, and they're really an awesome resource for you to connect with there. And I do see a question here for Tyler. Apologies for the additional admissions question, but is the flexible admissions process a commonly used path, or is it generally only used for extraordinary applicants? Once again, thank you for the answers. I really appreciate it. Leslie, do you want to speak to that point at all?
Yeah, I'd say a good number of the students that I admit to, or that we admit and I advise to be admitted, are flexible admission. Everyone's got different backgrounds, different accomplishments, etc. So it's not extraordinary applicants. It's often the norm.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Christine,
yeah, and Christine reiterates that. Very common admission pathways, yes. And we do that because we're very flexible, and we're not rigid about the kinds of requirements for entry into our programs. I personally am always trying to get people into the environmental programs because we need everyone we can get to solve these urgent societal issues.
Yeah, exactly. And as well, Leslie also popped her email into the chat box there, but here's her email address on the screen there if you do want to reach out. And also we have the email address for the School of Environment and Sustainability if you have some questions as well. So yeah.
Yes, and they probably should use the one up here since I keep making mistakes. I've got Royal Roads up there, so thanks.
Yes, leslie.king@royalroads.ca. Alrighty. So with that, we're just nearing the end. Yeah, just about hitting 1 p.m. So at this time, I think we'll wrap it up. But again, a big thank you to Elizabeth, who joined us earlier, sharing all those experiences. Leslie for facilitating that conversation and for sharing all the program information. And of course, to the team behind the scenes, Christine and Andrea, and the team from SES as well. It was great to have all of your help. And of course, everyone attending today. We really hope to have you join our Royal Roads community soon, or visit us on campus or anything, but please do reach out if you do want to continue the conversation.
Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. Good luck.
Yeah, and have a good day.